Oh, boy. Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hope you all are wonderful. Beautiful day. Haki Ami, the success scholar. Man. Hope you all are enjoying this wonderful cold weather. Hopefully, it won't be cold that much longer, but I have been wanting to share this series discussion that Sister Renee Miller did, and I'm going to share that interview for our Black Love Camp or Love Camp Africa, Tanzania. So let me go ahead and share screen. So Renee's doing a monthly series. Renee Miller is doing a monthly series each and every, well, she got her dates. I don't think there's a standard, uh, but she's been doing this series of discussions. So let me find it. Uh, okay, let's bring it up and enjoy the conversation, everybody. Peace.
And I invited her to our meeting.
It's still up. Let me make that.
Thank you, sweetheart, for the support. She
So
gave
good
me an
evening.
awesome massage and facial today.
We are live, Lisa Watford. Good evening and welcome to our spring equinox. This is our second Black Lives Matter conversation. I am Renee Miller. I'm super excited to be here with all of you guys. I'm joined with a phenomenal panelist today. So go ahead and introduce them. To my first left side, we have Karan, who is a divorcee, a real estate agent, a health coach. And just recently you got an award. So that was for the top 30% real estate agent.
Top 25%.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mama. Go ahead, Black woman. I see you.
And we have Chad, who is a divorcee in a new fabulous and great relationship.
Fabulous.
With who, pray tell?
And wink, wink, I'll tell you guys later. And he is also an insurance agent. And then, of course, we have Lisa, who is a happily single but open young lady who is a claims adjuster and one of my dearest friends of, I don't know, 25 years.
Girl, don't
and
start.
Then, of course, we have Rob, who is happily married, right? And he is the author of Niggas Ain't Astronauts, and he is an educator. So we have a phenomenal panelist tonight. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation around communication. So I'm super excited about our ability to have this conversation. I'm going to start a poll first because I think it's always good to see where we are. Last week, 63% of those that were on the call, and I think we had about 25, 27 people, and 63% said that our relationships have worsened as Black men and women. They have gotten worse. And so I thought tonight would be a great opportunity for us to talk about it. Me, myself, I'm big on communication and I'm big on how we communicate with one another because I think that makes all the difference. And I think it makes us to be able to see each other, evolve with one another and grow. And communication, I think, is one of our foundational essence of who we are. So I'm going to launch the poll and I want to get you guys' thoughts and then we're going to jump right into our discussion. Okay. So can you guys see the poll?
We can.
Yep. We can.
Okay. So I want you to go ahead and vote. First, just number one. Don't vote on number two yet. Okay. Just one. And it says, in your lifetime, communication amongst Black men and women has. So has it improved? Has it stayed the same? Has it worsened? What do you guys think?
Do we submit it?
So go ahead and submit. Yep, go ahead and submit.
I'll let you submit unless you answer all of them, it seems.
Okay, so then, okay, perfect. Now, this one is just for Black men. And it says Black, so that's just Chad and Rob right now. Just need y'all to answer. That Black women know how to communicate with Black men. Go ahead and put your answer in. From your experience, from what you see, you know, your actual experiences. This is
Chad, ain't even enough of us to actually kind of dilute our votes either.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of obvious.
You have my support because I can't unclick my answer.
Okay, and then now the women only. So Francis, Lisa, and Karan, go ahead and respond. Oh, and Crystal, go ahead and respond. Black men know how to communicate with Black women. Now, I only see one answer for number 2. Rob and Chad.
I answered because you have to answer all of them in order to submit.
I answered it.
Okay,
yeah,
Chad, did you answer?
I sure did.
Okay.
Wait a minute. It says Black men know how to communicate, and it just has choice 1. It doesn't give me a yes or no.
You got to scroll down. It says choice 1 and choice 2. I assume choice 2 was no. So
yeah, choice 2 is no.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not working for me at all. I mean, we don't have that many people on here, so why don't we just do a show of hands maybe, if that's easier?
Okay, yeah, so let me
I submitted.
So
it wouldn't work for me.
There you go.
So the results are kind of interesting, but what I see for number 2, I'm gonna focus on 1 and 2. How about we stay there for now? Okay. So when I look at 1, it looks like you all said it's like a tie. Some people say it's improved. Some people say it
stayed the same. And some people said it worsened.
It's worsened. Interesting. Right. So we're going to get into what that means. Who said, not necessarily who said what, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay. And then when I look at the second one, where it says Black women know how to communicate with Black men, I see 67% say no. Wow. And then I see for Black men know how to communicate with Black women, I see 100% no.
Wow.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
It was only one person voting.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that means we get to talk about it. We get to really talk about it. So let me cancel the poll. And then let's just jump right on into it. So you guys can see me now, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just checking.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So who is brave enough to talk about, because before we jump into the actual questions, I'm just curious to know who felt what. So we look at those of you that said communication has improved. Who feels that way and why? How has communication improved for Black men and women?
I would jump in and say that from and this is just my experience, that the communication has improved because my communication has improved, right? Getting a different level of clarity in what it is that I'm trying to communicating it with grace and from a place of care, right? Because I know that this has been a difficult place for us. Being in the work for myself and always being open to the fact that the opposite sex or whoever I'm speaking to at that time, even if it's my son, sometimes I recognize that because I'm in the work doesn't mean that they're in the work. So communication has improved because I'm much more intentional about the language and just, extending some grace in that specific arena.
I love that. Okay. So basically what I hear you say is improvement happens when we take ownership of how we contribute to communication.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. What about those of you that said it stays the same? No change? Like what made you stay the same? So over your 30, 40, maybe 50 years, you've seen it stay the same. Can you expound on that?
Who said that?
I don't know who said that. Okay, well, those of you that said it worsened.
You said it, Francis.
I did. I just was eating.
What about worsen? Why do you say worsen?
Well, she said it stayed the same. So let her expound on why you feel that way.
Okay.
I mean, in my 36 years of life, nothing's really changed culturally for it to change. I mean, right now you're like starting to see like Black identity kind of change and be a little bit more fluid, where I as a woman don't have to commit to being a strong person. So yes, there is onus on communicating my feelings and my vulnerability. That is new. But in regard to if like on an objective whole things have changed, no, that's my personal onus. That's my responsibility to my emotional quotient, right? Like, but there's no status change. You know, music is still very degrading in that example. There's no change in the examples that we see for how to communicate. So I really don't see a cultural shift yet.
Okay, I love it. All right. Anyone want to expound before I go to worsen? Because some folks said it's worsen. Okay.
I think.
So who wants to share that?
I had worsened as well. I just think that the language that we use, and I think I've shared this. I said this the last time we met. The language that we use towards each other is not loving language. It's very hostile and aggressive and angry language towards each other. I mean, if you look on Facebook or you look at most of the social media sites, Black men oftentimes aren't Black men, they're ends. Women aren't women, they're bees, or females, or there's all of this animosity and hostility that we present not only verbally, but in imagery as well. So I actually think it's gotten worse. And I would actually argue, kind of following up on Ms. Francis's point, is the language began to change, at least in my opinion, when Black culture got kind of fused and with kind of this kind of hip hop kind of street hood prison culture thingy that we got going on, where we don't really talk about love. We don't really talk about anything. I'll give you a quick example. I run a mentoring group in a school. And so this particular day, one of my boys' girlfriend broke up with him. He called her every B, every hoe, every whatever. And I was like, son, it's okay to be hurt. Like we all love, and we all, F her, F that B, F that, so I sell it to say, like, so culturally, we've kind of transformed from at least talking positively in some ways to now, anytime she doesn't give you what you want, she's a bitch or she's a hoe or she's a whatever. And I don't think that language is good. I also think when it comes to language too, we got to talk about like kind of age ranges as well, because at 52, I've lived a life, and I've been with, when I played football, I had friends who called women B's in some cases. Now, they weren't my direct friends. I didn't hang out with them, but I heard guys say that. And so, so anyway, I say all that to say, like, I think that the whole notion of communication and the worsening language, and it's worsening language, and I said I'm gonna quit, but I'm gonna say this thing real quick. Language is how we value things, how we define things, how we feel about things' significance or importance. So when you use that as how we use language, if I'm calling you bitch every time I see you, then what I've said indirectly is that you have no value, and you are open to whatever violation, violence, whatever it is that somebody puts on you because of the language that I use. And I think particularly for Black people, we're a little bit too loose with language, in my opinion. I'm gonna shut my mouth. I've been talking too long.
No, that's what this is about, conversation.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. There's a couple follow-up questions I have, but I want to first hear what Lisa has to say because they may tie in together.
Well, after that communication between Black men, I think collectively. So if we're talking about from an individual standpoint, I think, yes, some of us have done the work so that we communicate better in our personal relationships. But when I'm looking at it collectively, I think that it has, it's worsened. And I think that, part of it, and I know we want to blame everything on social media, but I do think part of it is because I think there's something to be said when you're communicating with people and you have to deal with somebody face to face. You understand what I'm saying? When you're having that organic conversation with another person face to face. I think that social media, it's funny because I was watching something on TV and they didn't even know how to engage each other without texting. And that is just mind-blowing to me. How is it now, like Francis's generation, I think Francis might not be a millennial, but that whole millennial they are very uncomfortable just having to pick up a phone and call you is just, and I get things evolve, but I think that, right, exactly, I think that we can never get away from that just natural organic interaction, that energy that we need to have when we are dealing with each other face to face. And I think that although social media has its positives, I think when it has come to communication, particularly between just Black men and Black women, I think social media also gives you an opportunity to say things you normally may not feel comfortable saying to me face to face. You understand what I'm saying? This false sense of confidence that you may not have if we were sitting down and having an organic conversation. And so, and even in my business, I mean, I think there are a lot of positive things about young people. I don't want to, slam these Gen X's. I even look at how they write now. You understand? They don't even, everything is this short text. They don't even know how to write a complete sentence sometimes. And I'm just like, what is on? I just think that it has, I feel like communication between us, that is one of the downsides of technology to me. I think that it has definitely worsened between Black men and women. And I think it does have something to do with the generations.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Chair.
Yeah, I agree with both Lisa and Robert. I think it's generational. I think I'm 48, almost 48 in October, I'll be 48. I think among people our age, like my age group, I think it's gotten better, but it's gotten better later in life because of experience and wisdom. And I think, back in my former career in fitness, I always said a lot of times that most of my clients had to have a heart attack before they, you know what, I should do some cardio, So I think a lot of people, when we get older and we might go through a traumatic divorce, well, you know what, maybe I should be a better communicator, So, you know what I mean? So it's so I think a lot of us have gotten better because, we've had to, if we wanted to, actually have great relationships in the second half of our lives. But I think a big thing with the younger generations is that, unfortunately, a lot of us parents didn't do a very good job of teaching our kids how to empower their voices, how to deal with conflict, how to speak for themselves, how to express how they feel, how to be okay with their emotions, and how to deal with someone face to face, and it's when I used to hire young coaches, a lot of times the hardest part of my job was teaching them how to communicate with clients, how to talk, how to have this general conversation. So I can't even imagine if having a general conversation face to face is traumatic. I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to actually deal with relationship stuff face to face. You know what I mean? So I think in that respect, it's gotten worse because I don't feel like this generation it's not entirely their fault. They haven't been equipped to deal with conflict and to deal with it, in a
Okay,
and a method. You know what I mean?
If I might add too, from an educational standpoint, when you look at actually literacy and reading comprehension, typically African American males are at the bottom of the performance level. So when you start talking about reading, language fluency, literacy, and things like that, when you read, obviously you're consuming words and you're getting definitions. If you're at the lower level of that, and if you're not performing at the level of everyone else, or you're significantly below everybody else, that continues to just kind of manifest itself as you move through education. And so you becoming an adult and you still don't have necessarily language. Now, women, in general, women use more words than men. That's a reality. But when you add in when you add in the literacy limitations that some of us have, some of us as being African American men, or boys who eventually become men, it becomes kind of very telling in some of the relationships, the ability to communicate and to actually have a cogent thought. An example, my wife and I were watching something, we were watching the Muhammad Ali thing on PBS. There were some brothers on there who were in the Army or Navy, whatever, I think Army. And these were not officers. These weren't, guys who had high levels. These were guys who were on the ground who were doing the grunt work. When you listen to them talk, they had cogent thought. Their sentences made sense. You knew where they were going. It all rolled together. We watched something a little bit later on, and it was like, I think my wife said, "Baby, what did he say?" And I was like, "Honey, I got nothing." And so again, this whole literacy thing, we sometimes make it about the system, but there's something wrong with. I agree I agree that we are struggling with Chad, that we're doing something wrong as we raise our boys, and the data indicate that across the board. So I'll leave it there.
So
I
want to share a couple thoughts that I heard, and I want to see if this is what you guys heard. So I heard amongst all of you in different ways that communication is challenging. One, either because it's not the way we need to learn about it is not happening. There are external forces culturally now that are influencing what we think is normal. But I also heard when you just spoke, Rob, that at the end of the day, we're also, and me and Chad was talking about this today, the way men think is different than the way women think. And I think men's ability to emote is different, and men's ability to process and think things the way women think things is very different. And so I think there's a lot of factors of what gets in the way of our ability to really communicate effectively. Lisa, I'm gonna get to you, but I want us to start transitioning a little bit because I also saw conflict and I want to talk a little bit about that. But go ahead, Lisa, what were you gonna share?
I think at the end of the day, I think everything that everybody said is very powerful and true. But at the end of the day, I just think, have we seen good examples of communication between Black men and Black women? Can we, you know what I mean? Like within collectively, even if you think about your own family, the people that who are in relationships or who are married, like have we all experienced more in abundance where we have seen just those examples and observed those examples of how good communication works in Black men and women? Because you can, not to say that data isn't important, literature, all of that stuff is important. But I think at the end of the day, seeing an example of it, actually carried out, I mean, does that happen as much as it needs to in our community?
You know where I saw the best communication between Black men and women ever in my life?
Where?
90s sitcoms. And like when you look at the way that Cliff and Claire talked on the Cosby Show, the way they communicated, like the way that Friends communicated on A Different World, on all those shows, like that's ideal, and it's like, I'm like, really, if you really look at it, those were brilliantly written examples of positive and productive communication.
Some people may disagree with me, but I'm gonna tell you that I always admired the communication was on good times.
Good, yeah.
Good Times had a lot of social commentary. And
Mhm.
to me, when I looked at how Flo interacted with James,
Mhm.
they had an ebb and flow where she never emasculated him, and
Not once.
always, even when it not right, and even disagreed, or, and to me, I felt like she was able to stand her ground, but at the same time respect that he was still the leader and the man of their household. I mean, to me, I mean, people may think that's fun, but Good Times had a lot of social commentary if you really check it out.
And he never disrespected her once. He never showed her disrespect, not once.
So may I add something? I think those are great fictional examples, but when you don't experience in your life real good communication, you don't know how then to make that good communication happen. You don't understand how that actually gets developed because you don't understand how Flo grew up or how Cliff grew up. In some ways you do with the grandparents and etc. But those fictional examples don't help common people because you don't have context for how to make those decisions. And so when you're in today's society, I feel like Rob and I have talked about this a lot. Our generation has proven to be the worst example to our children. We had great examples in our grandparents and in our parents. And then somehow, as we were trying to climb our ladder of success, we started entitling our kids and gifting our kids instead of spending real valuable time with our kids because we were trying to make it and do better than what our parents did for us. We forgot some things. And so if you're looking at how we quote unquote got here, even culturally, we have to examine our generation with regard to our communication and with regard to how we treat each other. And so, although to me those examples are great, we have to look at real examples. My parents have been married for 54 years. My grandparents have been divorced. I knew both those sets, my mom's parents and my dad's parents. And I'm not saying their communication was perfect, but I learned a lot watching them. A lot. And I didn't come from a violent household. I didn't come from, a household or households that was dramatic. And so I learned a lot by watching them.
See, did we have the best examples though? I think prior generations honestly had a lot of avoidance. I know there's a lot of people back in our grandparents' time who, granddaddy had like two side chicks.
And I agree with you. I tell my mother all the time, her generation
never dealt with it, and you had a lot of people from our parents' generation who had, who had problems and just never dealt with it.
About it.
They hate each other for years, and they waited to get the divorce until the kids were grown. I mean, I don't know if we, as a whole, had the best examples in prior generations.
I hear you on that. And I have some of that in my family, but it wasn't, we didn't, it was very clear when those things happened and there was some conversations about it. And some things we didn't know until people died. But the example that I saw practically on a day-to-day was fairly healthy. My parents didn't argue in front of us. We knew when they were upset with each other, but they took it to a different room. I didn't hear my mom and dad curse until I was like 16. I mean,
You're definitely fortunate.
So let's talk
for a second. Well, I do want to jump in on this really quick for a second. So it's a couple of things. One, to address Crystal, I think that's phenomenal that you had that experience, right? Well, when you grow up in a home, which I believe many of us have, perhaps maybe not you all on this panel, but many of us grew up in homes where your voice was silenced. So you were not allowed to speak. You were not allowed to address. You were not allowed to communicate or show, displeasure in anything that may have been going on. And even when I saw things happening with my parents, and they may take it behind closed doors. It's a lot of that that taught me and that showed me how important it was to have a voice. Not having a voice really left me extremely depressed as a young lady, right? Because I was not taught that communication. I wasn't given the opportunity or the chance to say, hey, this is how I feel about this. This is what I think about this, right? So having a family myself, it became important for me, for my children to understand, I don't care what it is. I want to hear what you have to say about it. I don't have to agree with it. But what I've seen is that some of my children don't understand how to confront. They don't understand that conflict can be healthy in their healthy ways to navigate through conflict because mom and dad took it to another room, right? So it's like, okay, it's okay for us to have our differences. And so we sat down as a family. We did circle time, family time, sit down. This is what's going on with such and so, and we all need to talk about it. And I want to know what you think about what's going on with your brother, right? And that was just the start of me attempting to, one, help my children understand that their voice was important, and then two, just give them just a chance that, listen, communication and language is something that you will learn over time and it will evolve. But if you do not even use your voice when you are up against these different situations in life, then you're just dead in the water when it comes to communication. So I heard all of you all, I would not put it even on Francis's generation. I have grown men, 50-year-old, 60-year-old men that would prefer to text me.
Yeah, it's
right.
legit. This is no better. You in your 50s, late 40s, you know better.
You know better than that. But here's the thing, do they really? So now these are some of the habits that we have created that us as individuals, both men and women, have allowed to be acceptable. So now I'm back at the proper communication. So when I say to you, listen, you're being able to date me and me date you and get to know you, we're going to have to skip all the way over text messages. I will not even take you serious if you cannot pick the phone up. And I don't play with it. So if they are seeing 5 other women that will play with it, then that's just a bad habit that they've developed, and it may work or may not work. But I'm back at, I don't have those kind of issues because I tend to say what I mean and mean what I say in the most kindest way.
I like that. I'm gonna write that down. I like that.
Can I just, Renee, I know you want to jump in there, and I just got one last thing to say, and then I'm gonna Crystal, I hear you say, I believe art imitates life. So I don't necessarily think that because these were people that we may have on television, that doesn't make those things were some people that could have been a real experience. So I do believe that art can imitate life. I do think that there was some reality that you can pick up from like when he was talking about the 96, you can see yourself in some of those things, right? The other thing that I wanted to address was, I totally agree with Chad. When I look at, me and my mother have had this conversation numerous times. When I look at her generations, my mouth is on the floor sometimes when I see some of the skeletons that fall out of their closet, because they may have had standard, and they may have had more. But see, what the conversation I've had with my mother is that you all, because you had this sense of morality that you all had to live up to, things were, the deception, you understand, was so incredible, back during time. You understand? Because there were certain things that, like Quran said, you couldn't talk about, you couldn't have a voice about. So to me, their generation, I don't know if they were necessarily the best, in my opinion, the best communicators. I get what you're saying, where you didn't see a lot of the, like, you didn't see where Robert was talking about how, men calling women out of their name and, all of that kind of stuff just openly, because I think they maybe had a higher certain standard at that time. But I'm telling you, the deception that they there are a lot of us that are still traumatized by the things that generation did that they just didn't us, that you do out when you show up at a funeral and you got a whole other family. Daddy, they had a whole side family that nobody knew nothing about. You like, what in the world? Like
my dad, man, yeah, I could tell you a whole story about him.
I am the product of an affair, so I mean that's just reality. I think though we're talking about, at least what I'm hearing is that we're talking kind of two different things. We're talking about behavior, which is definitely a piece of communication, and then we're talking about the verbal communication that people have with one another. I think the challenge for most people with communication, be it verbally, is that to have communication, you kind of got to know yourself, and you kind of got to know what you want.
Correct.
And that becomes the challenge, and also being honest with yourself. That's also a challenge. Sometimes we have $500 ideas, but we got $15 attitudes or $15 language or whatever it is. And I go back to what I said earlier about the literacy rates of, again, your language and your pool of words to pull from is a direct correlation to the amount of language that you consume, that you know, and that you can pull from. And if you can't read, or your reading level is significantly lower than other groups, you don't have those conversations. You don't have those higher end conversations. Now add, in this particular time, where you've got young men who are listening to hip hop, and young ladies to some extent, listening to hip hop 17, 18 hours a day, 16 hours a day, whatever it is.
And that's their influence.
The language that they're consuming is not it's not traditional English language. It's a lot of similes, metaphors, whatever, that don't really make any sense, and you don't really know what they're talking about. And then when you ask them to talk in English language, they really can't articulate themselves. The young man I was telling you about earlier, about the girlfriend who broke up with him or whatever, he could not articulate in clear and cogent ways what happened, how he felt, and what his response was going to be. It was, be this, be that, this, that, and the other. And you know what I mean, Miss Murphy? You know what I mean, Miss Murphy? Like, no, I don't know what you mean. So articulate yourself. What do you mean? And he really couldn't do that. And I think that, again, as we look back in time, a lot of our grandparents were dropped out of school. Maybe some were illiterate. Some, my mother was a high school dropout, but she read the newspaper every day, and her vocabulary was on point, and she taught me a whole bunch of words. But the question then becomes, is that happening in every house? Because in my opinion, that's actually part of the explosions that we're having all over the country with young black men, is an inability to process their pain, their anger, and then also articulate their anger. Because when you can talk about it, then you're not like a pressure cooker. If you can't articulate it, you become a pressure cooker, because you can't let it out, because you can't really articulate.
Well, why then do I listen to some, like I listen to some music, and I hope I can articulate this the way that I want to say it. I listen to even like music that we used to listen to, and even some of today's music, and they're very expressive. Mm-hmm. So it does, and I'm talking about, even some of today's, and it's funny to me because I'm like, well, how come that does not, now why does that not translate to real life? Because I listen to some of that, I get it. Some of the music nowadays is very lustful. I mean, we always talk about that, but there are some songs that I find that are very profound. And like, how come that doesn't translate into real life?
So that's probably a good segue to go into a different direction, similar direction, because I think, Lisa, to your point, I think we have some phenomenal songwriters, but I think to Rob's point, if you either don't know how, didn't learn how to do that, don't have great examples, to Chad and Karan's point, you're not going to be able to express something that we see in art form. Those might be just great writers. Right. So one of the things I wanted to ask you guys is, what do we do well, and what do we need to do better? And then I want us to go below the surface, because we're having good conversation, but I really want to get to some of the things that are really happening in our communities that we hear over and over again that are real problems. I mean, I think we're talking a little bit, but we're still on that. To me, I think we're still a few layers up. So one of the things I just want to start off is, what do we do right? Like, when you look around your friends, your family, your own relationships, what do we do right as a community that we say, you know what, we've either evolved in this way, or because I think we're in an era now where, to Karan's point, we are being more empowered to verbalize and voice ourselves. We are. I mean, I think,
For sure.
we're in a time now where you need to say what you feel. Now, you might not know
sure.
how, but you're still
Right.
encouraged to do so. Whereas
Right. The
before,
freedom.
the culture was different.
For sure.
Owning your voice is important now. So what do we do this right? And what could we do this better? Because I'm moving us into a different direction. So, and everybody can respond. Francis, you can even share as well, because I want to hear, because her generation is a little bit younger than our generation. And so, we need to also talk about, there is a real generation distinction in how we do things. So I'm gonna start with whoever wants to begin. What do we do correct when you look around? Go ahead, Chad.
I think what encourages me is I'm seeing a lot more emphasis on mental health, because that's crucial. I know when I was just angry and just bitter about the way that my divorce went down, when I started seeing therapists, it really got me a lot more aware of where my personal communication flaws were, right? Because I'm a high logic communicator, and that doesn't translate well to people who may be high emotional or higher impact. Like my son, he's a high impact communicator. Like he's all heart, and I'm like mostly all brain, but he's all heart, So when I'm trying to talk to him, it made me realize that and I was like, man, like I'm not feeling him enough, and I need to feel him more. And becoming a better communicator with him actually made me a better communicator for other relationships as well, because I learned how to manage this and open up more of this. So, and but I wouldn't have gotten that if I hadn't have been with my therapist, because I think, just speaking from Black men, I feel like we don't get help as much as we need to. We go through a lot as Black men in America, and I don't feel like enough of us, talk to each other about those things. I think we tend to bury how we feel a lot, and it hinders us in our relationships, with Black women. So I just feel like, in general, I do feel like that's become more important in the community, and I see some definite progress in that department.
Got it. That's good insight. Okay. Who else? What else do you see that's working well?
I would say I would piggyback off of Chad to say that what I do see is that there is the space where we are at least open to the listening, not necessarily in the hearing, right? But the older we get and we've had these traumatic life experiences, right? Or we've not been able to have the level of success that we're looking for in our relationship, I do believe that people are starting to pause long enough to listen and to take into consideration that I play a part in it, right? Versus the constant blame, right? In your 20s and your 30s, it's so easy to say it's your fault, and this is the reason why. But even in a quiet space, as I've evolved as a woman, I'm able to go back and take a look at some of the points I would say in my marriage that were never ever my battle. It was never my responsibility, to pick the ball up and run as a woman. But my mouth would not allow me to see, hear, nor understand that. In my 30s, it just wasn't like, yo, we got to get this right. We have a family. What is wrong with you? Right. And so I think that it is in the listening. And I think once we get to, the hearing part, and then there's, along with what you're saying, Chad, I think it's the emotional intelligence and well-being that's tied into that as well. Because if I've had men to say to me more than enough, don't ask the question if you cannot handle the truth. right? And so in that, our ability to be honest with one another also requires some level of responsibility in being able to handle what we need to hear. So if I hear you say to me, I'm not happy in our marriage, versus try to blame and make it completely about you or me, let's just sit long enough to say, okay, what's not making you happy? And really unpack that, because it's not necessarily, it took years for me to really understand that my divorce was not my fault, right? And that your inability to be happy inside of this marriage was really, really tied into you not being happy with you, right? So it's in the listening, it's where we are emotionally, our ability to sit still and unpack it long enough to, really have the conversation, and I see it more with men that I am dating, like I went through a very bad divorce or very, bad breakup. So I do know that I have work to do on myself. And I'm happy to hear that. That's something that I feel like I can work with if you're actually in the work. So that's big for me today, for a man to be able to communicate that.
Yeah, I read something on social media, and it said, I'm not impressed when you buy me things. Give me a receipt that you went to therapy. Now we can talk. Because, a lot of times for me, if I hear a man has done some work on himself and he's taking it serious, I'm seriously taking him serious, because he's willing to take accountability and do the work. And so that's always good to hear. And I'm always good to hear that. Okay, what else is working? Because we're going to get to what could we do better in just a second.
You know what I think is working? I think that it still matters. I think it still matters to us. At the end of the day, I think that we still in the struggle, still in the fight. And to me, I think if, as long as we are still willing to fight to get back to one another, I think that is what's working. That I'm trying to figure this, and we just haven't thrown our hands up, and it's like, too hard to get. Like, we are still, there's so many conversations about Black love. If you go on social media, if you go on Clubhouse, like, it's so many, we are still trying to figure this thing. How do we get back to one another? And that, I think, out of everything is encouraging, that we still in it. I was right beside, I was your day one. And I'm gonna continue to be, things have gotten kind of funky between us, but we're still trying to figure this thing out and get things, get back to one another. And that's what I'm encouraged by. That I see a lot more of these conversations happening.
I love that. That's good. Okay.
So I would say, kind of piggybacking on what Lisa said, I think that I think what's good is that there are a ton of vehicles for people to actually have these dialogues, to hear different ideas, to listen, process, and probably integrate some things into their own lives. I know for the one thing I will say that I think that is a part of communication, and that's safety. You need to know that whoever you talk to is safe and won't belittle you, begrudge you, whatever. And so I see a lot more of the spaces coming up for people in regards to, and a lot of more vehicles for people. I think that those things are wonderful for people to exchange, particularly in this COVID time, because this COVID time has been really tough for people who live alone. They don't really have anybody to talk to. And oftentimes the computer, whether it's Clubhouse, it's Facebook, it's Zoom, whatever it is a way for them to connect with people. So I think all these vehicles have been much more helpful than I think about in our time when we were in our 30s or 20s. Like, there weren't these vehicles. You had to seek them out, or just go to one of your buddies' houses or whatever it is. So again, to me, it's the vehicles that are really good for people.
So, we're going to segue into what's not working. So I'm going to start off by saying, I think what's not working is that not enough of us make it safe, and safe to really be seen and heard without judgment, ridicule, or lashing out. And me and Chad was talking about this today. It was like one of the things that we were talking about is how we show up when we're communicating under duress or under stress, and how do we respond to one another. So I definitely think what we can do better is make it safe. But now I'm curious, because I was going to ask you guys tonight, oftentimes we think it needs to be safe for the woman. You know, the woman needs to be safe. And I know I'm big on emotional safety. But I'd be curious to hear Chad and Rob talk about how safety is important for you guys as well. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper.
For me, I just need to make sure that I can be transparent and vulnerable with you without feeling like it's going to turn into state's evidence. You know,
what?
State's evidence. You know,
Right.
to be used on,
face.
to be used on another docket in the future. You know what I mean. So. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the first thing with me is that, I'm allowed, to be honest and transparent and emotionally vulnerable with you, without being, looked at as soft or having it like thrown back in my face at a later date.
Wow.
So that's the first thing. I've heard from a lot of men who say that, that's a big reason why, they don't feel safe talking to their women on that level, because, they feel like, they're, it's going to be used against them. Their vulnerability will be weaponized against them.
Wow.
Got it.
That's cool, friend.
Last week we talked. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Francis.
I want to argue that comment, because is there a venue for men to hold safe space for other men? I think that doesn't happen first. It is not the onus or the responsibility for women to hold a safe space for men, and I think that's part of some of the stress.
It is. I mean, like if I'm with you, like as my partner, like I feel like I'm kind of entitled to that space to where I can be open and vulnerable with you. You know what I mean? Like that should be something that.
Yeah, I think that's historical in Black relationships, that Black women take care of it all and everyone's emotion and ignore their own. But what I'm presenting and what I'm asking.
That's not what I'm saying.
What I'm presenting and what I'm asking is, what does a safe space provided by a Black man for a Black man look like?
Okay, well, let me jump in for 1 second. So, Francis, your point is valid in the sense that
I think so too.
You're saying there needs to be safe spaces for men to have that from one another. But I think what Chad is saying is that we're talking about communication, in order for us to have healthy communication, he's saying as a Black man, I need a safe space to open up and tell you my thoughts and it not be used against me. And quite honestly, I think all of us want and need that. I just don't think we think Black men want that as much as we as women want that, and I think that's what he's saying, is that it needs to be safe as a human being. And we tend to think of Black men not necessarily needing that, at least been my experience.
And I think that's what I'm trying to stress, is that Black men do need that safe space, right? Mm-hmm. And while I understand, it's even like a pre-funct for you to explain to me what he means. I understood what he said. Mm-hmm. I have a very high reading comprehension. I understood. And that's not to insult, but I'm saying is that if communication between Black women and Black men is not going well, mm-hmm. then there must be more communication between Black men, right?
I think I hear what she's saying, and I kind of agree with her.
So if, the probability that Black men are talking to each other more positively in that sense, is there a safe space between Black men, and what does that look like? Because if you are only expecting Black women to provide a safe space for you, I don't want that responsibility. I'm tired. I have enough of my own emotional responsibility to then take on somebody else's as a pre-funct. I think that we always think of women providing nurturing safety.
Well, I think if you're thinking about it from a one-sided point of view, I'd agree with you, but I'm not talking about a one-sided like relationship here, you know, to where you serve my needs and F you. You know what I mean? Like, you know, while there should be better spaces for men to talk, like to me, that's irrelevant when it comes to me talking to my lady. You know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, if I'm with you, again, like if I'm with you, like I want to be able to feel like I can be as open with you as I can be. All I want from you is for you to listen to me and make it okay for me to be open with you. Like, I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm not asking you to be my therapist. I'm asking you to be my partner and allow me to be vulnerable in your presence.
Yeah,
But
I think what I'm presenting is that in all relationships, in all same-sex relationships, in Black culture, there is a dynamic of competition.
Same sex?
So, yep. Take Lisa today. I just met Lisa. Lisa is older, so we don't have a peer-to-peer relationship. She took on a nurturing role, and that is what we expect intergenerationally, right? We expect older Black women to be nurturing and providing, right?
Is that fair?
If we were the same, if we were the same age, there would be a competition dynamic. There just is. There is a competition dynamic between.
But I think we're going, okay, so let me reel it back in because I want to hear what you have to say, Francis. But I think I think we're not addressing the question unless I'm missing something. So I want to hear what this was really only supposed to be men answering this question, but that's okay. Lisa, I feel like I want to hear your voice because you're saying you get what Francis is saying.
And I get what Francis is saying.
Can you let Robert?
Yeah, let Robert go.
Then
Robert, jump in. Oh,
okay, so as a man who's run a men's group, I ran a men's group out of my house for probably about 1.5 years, 2 years. Brothers came to my house. I had topics and questions, very much like we're doing here today. When I tell you that brothers came to my house and the meeting was supposed to be from like 1 to 3, and dudes wouldn't leave my house till 1, 2, 3 a.m. because they had so much to get off their spirits. There's 2 parts to this thing, and I think they were kind of overlapping in some ways. Maybe we weren't catching them. Like, there is a space that brothers need to have amongst themselves. I jokingly called my house the Oprah house because we would talk about any and everything. We talked about colorism. We talked about homosexuality and heterosexual, and we talked about a whole bunch of topics. And the beauty of it was brothers felt safe enough to express themselves. And there were times when we went way, like I would ask a question and they go way off and we just would never come back to the questions. But we do need, and I'm in agreement with Francis, there is a need for a space for Black men to just be. Because the other thing that I heard from brothers is that when they got with their ladies, they couldn't get a word in edgewise or whatever it was. Now, I will say this too, we do have spaces and places for each other in our friendships. So it isn't that we have to even sometimes coalesce around a particular building or space or meeting place or whatever. Sometimes you pick up the phone, dog, guess what happened? Da, 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 da. It happens. We handle ours possibly in a different way. Maybe it looks different. Maybe we don't define it in the same ways that women do. But I think that the vehicles and the spaces and the conversations and the supports are really the same. But I also think in relationship to communication, you got to have guys around you that will also hold you accountable on that communication. And so we as brothers held each other. Like, I don't have a friend who is a bad father, because we will all lean into each other like, dog, you're supposed to be spending more time with your kid. Like, we hold each other accountable. So we do have those conversations and we do have communication. I know that there's been a lot of talk about Black men saying, well, they love each other. We said it to each other for the last 15, 20 years. Now, we don't say it every time we get together. We will get together and we'll crack jokes on each other, whatever, but that's also our way as men of expressing and sharing love. I had a friend just the other day talk about his son who was locked up, who was doing some things he shouldn't have been doing. And he was like, dude, this feels so good. I'm able to get this off in a place, in a safe space. And that's what I was saying when we first started a little bit earlier, that communication, at least vulnerable communication, is around safety. And people feeling comfortable and feeling like they're not going to be judged, they're not going to be embarrassed or humiliated, and they're going to get really love and support. And again, in our group, and it actually ended because I got involved with some other things during the week. But I still got brothers who email me like, "Dog, when you gonna put that back together, man? Like we love that." Like I literally was with somebody Friday, and it was a guy from the group who was like, "Man, we used to do that, man. Remember you used to do that? Like we need to do that again. We need to do that again." So there's a need out there for just Black men to come together and coalesce around just being men and sharing and loving on each other in a way that isn't that doesn't have to have the bravado. Because that's the other thing that we didn't have is we in that room we didn't have any bravado because we just talked and cracked jokes and loved on each other.
Well, Robert, what I hear, and I may be wrong, but I hear Francis saying is, but you are not and I wish that you were that group of men that you had, like you said, that could come together and that became more of the culture. Do you understand?
Yeah, I agree. I can agree with you on that. Like,
and that's what I hear. And I agree with Francis. I think that men have a great deal of influence on others. Mm-hmm. I think that if men held each other accountable, like you said, you held each other accountable to be good fathers, to be good husbands. Men definitely have a lot of influence, just like women. And I think that community that you had is not as plentiful. Like you said, those safe spaces amongst men to just drop all the bravado, be able to be vulnerable. You know what I'm saying? That unfortunately, I don't think that is, I think we're moving towards that. Like Chad said, I think that now men are starting to do the work on themselves, starting to understand about therapy, starting to, and I think that's a great thing. But I still think that there is still a lot more superficiality when it sometimes comes to men and their engagement. And I wish that the group that you had became more of a norm. Because I think men have a great deal. And I think that's what I heard Francis saying. And that
we talked about the guy I was with Friday. We were talking about sometimes just there is a base set of expectations for Black men wherever we are. There's a base set of expectations, and my buddy and I were talking, and we were always, so we kept saying like we didn't always fit that expectation. Now for me, I was an athlete, so I was able to get my Black cool points because I was a great athlete, and so people let me in because I ran a 4.240 or I scored 6 touchdowns, whatever it was. I was accepted into the larger Black male kind of milieu, if you will. But truth be told, I love sports, but I also love space. I also love reading comic books. Those were things that I had to, in some ways, keep hidden from the larger Black male group because that wasn't cool. And because that I wasn't accepted or that wasn't acceptable. I think about myself. I'm 6'3". I'm 260 pounds now. When I was playing football, I was 195 pounds. Again, my ability to play to score touchdowns or to make game-winning plays was my cool points. And I think that's part of the challenge for Black men is moving away from the base and becoming fully developed human beings. And I'm not saying we're obviously not all of us are that way, but I know for my buddy and I, we were talking, we felt like we were really lonely as young men because we couldn't have conversations about space or science or comic books or hard rock or whatever it was. You had to fit into this tiny little box of what it is to be quote unquote a Black man in America or a Black boy in America. And it just swag.
I think we got off topic here.
Yes.
It's so funny because you were reading my mind, Chad. I was like, wait, how do we go so far left? And sometimes it's okay because it's all good information. Yeah. But what I was going to say is, yes, if there are spaces, and we do need more spaces for Black men to actually be able to connect, that's one thing. But us being vulnerable to one another, it's not exclusive in my mind. They can both coexist. They are both necessary. is what I think. So,
but I didn't think we got off course. I think that it tied into each other. I think that Black men having a safe space among each other can then transition into how they engage and how they interact with their mate. I think that, like you said, the 10 coexist. I think that it's both. I think because Black women, we talk about any and everything with our, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think, and then that can, I believe, can then transfer and translate into their relationship with their partner.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the question was, you know, we started off saying, what can we do better? And then we started talking about what do men need? Because I also now want to ask women what you guys need. But before I go there, I want to, you know, switch a little bit. We talked a little bit about the word respect came up a few times. I heard it throughout. What do you guys think? How does respect play a part in communicating with Black men and Black women? And I'm curious to know, do we find that there's enough respect in our communication? Is that a major factor in our ability to communicate with one another?
It's huge.
The lack of or having it. What do you guys think?
It's huge.
I agree. I think it's huge. And I was literally just having this conversation with my wife a little bit earlier. Like, one of the challenges for us is how we view our relationships and our responsibility in that relationship. I was a single dad for however many years I was. And I used to do an evaluation with my daughter. And some people are like, oh, that don't make sense. I used to ask my daughter, like, okay, Pumpkin, how can I be a better dad to you? And what do you need from me? And how do I need to adjust my behavior? To me, that's a small thing that we can do. I asked my wife that last week, like, how can I be a better husband? Part of, to me, this whole notion, when you start talking about Black men and Black women, is this notion of responsibility and what it means, what we have to be for one another. My personal belief, and I literally said this to my wife earlier, my personal belief is if I create you and bring you into my life, or I invite you into my life as my significant other, be you my girlfriend, my wife, whatever, I have a responsibility to you to ensure that you have a great experience, or at least a good experience. And part of that responsibility is me checking in with you. How are we doing? What can I do better? Is there anything I can do? Now, there's some things, obviously, I'm not perfect, but I think that when we're invested in relationships and we're trying to make relationships better, and we love people and we respect them, then those are the things that we have to do. We have to ask questions, because what I know, the way I treated my ex-girlfriend is not the way that my wife wants to be treated, or they're not the things that she may like. So again, I think you have to do some soul searching and ask some questions about that.
And I believe that we submit to each other. Like, when you're really connected in your work, like to your point, Rob, you submit to each other. It's not, I think we have this notion that women are supposed to do too much for our men, or, you know, but I'm a firm believer that at the end of the day, if it's a really healthy relationship and you're practicing good habits, it really is, I'm submitting to you. I'm doing what makes you happy, and you're doing what makes me happy. And happy, that's probably not the right word, but we're doing things to acknowledge and love
and value.
Yeah.
Yeah, value. Rob, those are two very easy questions, but they have a very carry a lot of weight. You understand what I'm saying? Just to ask her, what can I do better? You know, check in. How we doing? You know, are there some things that we need? To me, that is the baseline of what we're talking about as far as keeping that open communication. Let me check in with you. Let me see where we are. You know what I mean? I think that if anything, that sparks the conversation. But also, can we again tie back into, but can I be real? Can I be vulnerable? Can I be honest? Let's say can I say that? Can I tell you this is where I feel like these some areas that you need to improve in, and your ego won't be so, you know, so big that I can't, you know, be real with you in that, you know, and be honest with you and be truthful. Can you handle, I hear men say all the time, women can't really handle the truth. A real woman, I'd rather you hurt me with the truth than deceive me. Because that breaks me down even more. I don't care how what you did might be one of the most hurtful things. But one thing I can respect you, if we're going back to respect, one thing that I will respect you for is because at least you came with me with honesty.
Yeah.
It might have been some jacked up stuff that you did. You can break me all the way down to the ground. It will always be, if we're talking about, and men's love language is respect. That's how they hear love. When you disrespect, if I hear my brother say, it was just when I listened to him talk, that is how love is communicated to them. Women love is communicated differently, but a man, his love language for the most part is respect, and you showing him respect. That's how you communicate love you.
Yeah, TD Jakes had a great lesson on this in one of the courses that I took of his called He Emotions, and he had a great piece on it, and he said that in his experience of counseling literally thousands of couples, he said that both men and women want to feel valued, like no matter what, across the board. We all want to feel like we have basic human worth. Women need to feel loved before they'll give respect. Men want to feel respected before they'll give love.
Give love. That's it.
You know, so I think it's almost like a circular thing. You know, it's like and to your point, Francis, like a while back, I think a lot of Black women do feel like they've had to doctor their Black men up, and it's not fair. You know, and I feel like in some ways it's made a lot of Black women almost allergic, to the whole thing, but
of a project.
Yeah,
that's what I call it. Tired of a project.
And I feel like just as men, like, I don't think we should expect our partner, to be our doctor. Like, that's not their responsibility, but like Renee said, if I'm 100% focused on meeting your needs, serving you with love, and you are 100% focused on meeting my needs and serving me with love, like, that's respect. Like, everyone's happy, but the problem is,
disagree, but I appreciate what you're saying.
What's that?
I semantically disagree, but I appreciate what you're saying.
What's the semantically disagreement?
Being 100% into somebody else is not gonna be reciprocal. You need to be 100% into yourself.
No, that's not what I'm talking about at all.
You need to be whole yourself.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. No. What I'm saying is, in regards to your relationship, I'm not saying that, because that's codependency and that's not healthy. No, what I'm saying is, like, this is like extra, but I'm saying, like, a lot of people, including myself, admittedly, back in my marriage, we have this pride to where I'm only going to give you this little bit if you give me this, and it's like, and to me, if, like I told Renee the other day, if I'm holding back my love from you based on conditions, how the hell do I expect this thing to work? It's like, either I'm all in or I'm all out. You know what I mean? So it's like,
and that's a very powerful realization.
So either I'm dedicated, if I'm with you, I'm not getting rid of myself to make you happy, but I am going to give the energy that I dedicate to you, to being the best possible person I can to you, and serving whatever your needs are without losing myself.
That's what's up,
all I'm saying.
That's what's up. That's what's up. That's what's that you'll be to me. What I love what he said is, I hear what you're saying, but he's not saying that he's going to lose who he is. He's saying that he is willing to give all of who he is to his relationship. You understand? And that's what a lot of us are so scared to do, to taste the truly love, because there is risk that comes along with it. Yeah. But you're never going to be able to really get fulfilled if just though you gotta ask me. that safe, you gotta find that person that you feel safe and say, you know what, you are worth this risk, and I'm gonna take it, and I'm gonna lay it all on it. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to give you, but you gotta make sure that value is important. You make sure that you're giving it to somebody mature enough to understand what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Because if you get somebody who's not a good steward over it and don't know what to do with it, just saying, you know what, I'm gonna be in this unconditional. Regardless of how this thing may play out, but you want it. I mean, you're never 100% sure, but you want to try to make every effort to make sure that you're giving it to somebody that's mature enough to handle that type of vulnerability. And that's I think the challenge that we have. I want to say one last thing and then I'm done. You know what you said, what do we do wrong? I was listening to a song, you know, I'm a very much so artsy person, and this just spoke to me, bottom line. I am looking for somebody who I really thought what it was, who will think I'm beautiful even when I'm stuck. You understand?
Even when you're what?
Now I'm trying not to use all, you know, who will still see my beauty, even when I am just emotionally, physically, I may not be at my top of my game. You understand what I'm saying? But you still see the beauty, and you still, I think so much pressure, particularly put on Black women as far as how we show up physically. And I'm just looking for somebody who can just be like, you know what, yeah, you might not like you did when we first met, but that still don't mean, you understand? I'm not saying that Black women still shouldn't have some responsibility and want to make sure that they are attractive, man. But I think that it's so much put on us to have this physical beauty. And I think I'm just trying to find a person that is willing to accept, you know, that may change and it's still cool. I'm gonna still mess with you. You understand what I'm saying? Because I see at some point I have to see that the intimacy of who we are is just as important as that I'm still physically attracted. I hope what I'm saying is making sense. But there is so pressure put on us as Black women. I mean, even at 50 to you know, listen, I'm not trying to compete with these Instagram people. I'm 54 years old. What I look like trying to compete with Instagram? Are you serious? Like, you should have met me 25 years ago, boo. I can't get at you. The person that can see beyond that. You understand what I'm saying? That you know what? Yeah, nah, you ain't. I can show you some pictures when I ain't gonna say I was back then, but I was, you know, I was still in the game at one time. It's so much more. You want that one make you for an that's gonna give you some excitement. I'm your girl. That's gonna hold you down. I'm your girl. I'm not saying that there are not some things that I need to do again to want to be attracted to my man, but at this stage in the game, that can't be the end all to be all. And that's what I think that's hard to find.
That's a whole different
if I'm being
direction.
really concise,
I want to say back to the holding space.
What we can do better.
Francis.
What, Francis?
No worries. Yeah, I want to be really concise about what we could do better. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. And I wanted you to answer the question.
It's just intimacy as a whole, not being dependent on a sexual relationship. I think in Black culture, if we could have more intimacy across the board, intergenerationally, same-sex relationships need a more depth of intimacy for all of this to work. Because I think that Black women are starved for love, and I think that Black men are starved for respect. So if we don't limit these meters to only our sexual relationships, then all of our interactions will be so much more fulfilling.
Yeah, that's facts. Because you know, vulnerable admission. Like, you know, when I was like newly single, you know, if Renee knows this, so this isn't a shocker to her. You know, like I was out there. because I had this big like scar across my heart, and I was trying to fill it up with all the wrong things, man. And and it didn't get me anywhere at all. I felt worse, and I felt more depressed.
What was you doing, Chad?
Listen, you don't want details. Stop being nosy.
I put my details out there. When I broke up with my daughter's mother, and her and my daughter moved out of our apartment, I had 7 women in 9 days.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. It was bad for
That's
men.
real talk. Like it's me.
Yeah.
That's me being real. That is me being
You
real.
got to put it all out there though. But okay.
She was like, yo.
Gee,
Yeah,
a little decorum
Yeah,
is
there's-
nice, but that's me. Okay.
You're right, Francis. That's true. Like, to be real with you, I didn't really know what real intimacy was, honestly, until this current relationship. Honestly, I didn't really know what real intimacy was. I'm not saying that, to gas anybody up, but
Oh,
honestly,
please, she grinning from ear to ear.
No, but really, no. But
Yeah,
that's
she got
real,
lipstick
though.
on her earlobes. Now she's
I
smiling.
didn't have that with my ex-wife. I didn't have that with the girlfriend that I had, after my ex-wife, and after that whole mess phase, and but when I finally got it, it's like a lot more things about what I really been needing all this time became clear, and I think that's why things are working so well, is because I really understand what the full scope of intimacy is. So I totally agree with you.
Well, I'm gonna put a shame. It's not even a shameless plug. I'm gonna just put a plug in. It's interesting because one of the reasons why we started having these panel discussions is because we're preparing to go to Tanzania. We have a love camp coming up October 3rd to 13th. And one of the things we're excited about is being able to teach some of what you're sharing, Chad. And so I didn't, I'll pay you later, but I didn't ask you to say that because, it really is something that I pride myself on. And I'm glad, Francis, you said that. But I do think that, being able to be vulnerable and submit to one another is what makes relationships so profound. And it doesn't take as much as we think it takes. It takes being willing as a first start. And I think a lot of us just have to, first, to Francis' point, to be more intimate and be more willing and not have sex and other distractions take part. And we talk a lot about how we communicate and being vulnerable with one another as a baseline of who we are. And so I think that makes a huge difference. And when we go to Tanzania, one of the things we want to do is really explore these conversations at a deeper level, because I was debating today that I want to talk about the word healing, but I think more and more healing has to happen within our communities also for us to be able to do some of the things we're talking about. So I appreciate you guys saying that. Now, I'm mindful of the time. It's about 8:30. There is one more topic I wanted to talk about. Probably would take us another 15 minutes, maybe. But I definitely want to ask you guys about communication as it relates to the Black. So first of all, I want to make sure that we talk about the Black. I feel like we talked a lot about the Black man, not as much about the Black woman. So let me first go there and balance out the conversation just briefly. Lisa and Karan, I want to hear from you guys, and Francis as well, and Crystal as well, as around, a lot of 100% of you said that no, the Black man doesn't know how to communicate with you. We heard a little bit of what the Black man needs in terms of him being communicated with. What do you guys feel you need in terms of communication for you? 100% of you said no, the Black man does not know how to communicate with you. So what do you guys need? And I think I'm going to save the next topic for next time, because I want us to dig a little deeper in that one.
Yeah, I would say that, just listening to you all, it all ties together. And it's sometimes I feel like it's so much, it's broad, it's big. It's not being in a relationship and holding that space and being able to be vulnerable. That benefits so many people, not just me. So many people get to benefit from our ability to do that. So now you talk about, thinking about what you were speaking about, Chad, about the intimacy, right? And so in putting in the work, you as well, Francis, in creating that intimacy, how do you come into it and step into being okay with being vulnerable even inside of that, right? And not becoming so uncomfortable with how that makes you feel. So my ability to hold space for an individual, it's no attack on me. Because being able to do that, whether this relationship survives it or not, it benefits so many other people. It benefits your daughters, it benefits your sons. I like to believe that that trickles down and it benefits my daughters and my sons, because somebody's got to be in the work of doing it, right? So for me, it's really about, listen, can you just be in the work with yourself and be okay with that? I was in a relationship for 4 years, and I'm clear that that man loved me the very best that he could with the information that he had to know how to love. We had great intimacy, right? He didn't like it, and he was honest about that. I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable with how much I love you. I'm not comfortable with how it makes me feel. I'm not comfortable that you are so empowered in this, and what that would look like for me if you make a decision that this doesn't work for you. So I felt a responsibility, even though I didn't want to be responsible. The only thing that I could ask of him is that you be in the work for yourself, because so many people benefit from that. Your daughters will, and your granddaughters will, because you will show up completely different in the world, right? So I'm okay. I held space for him. I expanded and I held that space for him, because that's got to be a painful place to experience that kind of love, and to be afraid to be vulnerable to that kind of love, and afraid to just show up and feel like it's okay to love someone like that. So it all ties in for me. It's the work, it's the healing, it's the vulnerability, it's the intimacy. And last month we spoke about love, right? So it all goes back to love and care. And I can care for you and love you beyond you being my man, or this relationship, going the full distance. Right? Because at the end of the day, I still have the ability to recognize that as a Black man, you showed a different type of burden. So if it benefits somebody else in the world, that's fine. I'm so okay with that.
That's
love
big.
that.
That's big.
Because
A
that
lot
what
of
that
women
says to
wouldn't look
me,
at it that way. That's big. That's huge.
because what I hear is that we, I always say when I was out there serial dating, I was very cognizant of how I showed up as to not cause more casualties to the next one. And I've had people say to me, I'm better because of you. And even though, to your point, Karan, we didn't work out, but I was very careful not to create casualties for that next woman. And I think if we thought more like that, that's a really deep thought process. If we were thinking more like that, almost like my brother and my sister's keepers, we probably would see more healing also in our communities, because we would recognize that what we do or what we say or what we don't do or what we don't say is going to contribute how our communities impacted. So that's a really good point. Lisa?
What am I answering again now?
So I was just asking you, we talked
got that wine kicking in, that wine.
No. I was kind of hanging on to, because I think what Karan said was very powerful. No, but what was the question again?
So the question was, we talked quite a bit about what the Black man needs in communication, and just, so what would you say the Black woman needs?
I think I probably talked more from a personal standpoint, but I think I've already said what I need. I think that I really am I wish we could get more to just, that things will go just beyond the superficial and go, that we kind of, like I said, it's nothing wrong will want to be attracted to your man, and you want to be attracted to your woman for sure. But I wish we could move beyond it. There were other things that kind of also took priority when we are engaging one another, or when we are looking for somebody to, to be that partner to build with, that there may be other things be more important than,
Well, I love that, Lisa, and that will be an episode, because I this is not about communication, but to your point, I often say, a lot of us have bought into this whole number system. And I know that when people call in the Kevin Samuels show, one of the things that he'll ask is, if Beyonce's a 7, then what are you? And women will actually respond, well, then I'm a 6, or I'm a 10, or I'm an 8. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to allow you to reduce me to a number. So to your point, I think there is room for us to have a really good conversation about, the physical and appearance and what our men have bought into, because a lot of our Black men have bought into America's traditional standards, whether it's hair, whether it's body, whether it's age, whether it's whatever. And I think there's room for us to explore it. But that's a whole.
I think from the communication standpoint, I think I'm gonna just keep it really simple. I just really think if we just again had that space for people just to show up and just be. I mean, I'm big on just being real. Like, I gotta just let me. I can't, and especially at this stage in the game, I can only be who I am. Does that mean that I don't want to evolve? Does that mean it's not something I feel like the brother that was with us the last month, and when he talked about that female and male energy, he gave me food for thought. How do I show up when I'm communicating? Do I need to be more? I am a very animated, and I'm passionate about things, but let me be mindful when I'm engaging with men that is that coming off too masculine. Those are things that I am still wanting to explore, but at the end of the day, still allow me just to show up as Lisa, and it's cool. Like, it's okay. We can have, that genuine, that people can genuinely be who they are and communicate who they are. I mean, I think that's something that's just real important for me.
Understood. Well, I appreciate all of this conversation that we have today. One of the things I do want us to talk on next time is about the conflict, because conflict came up quite a bit today too, but I think it deserves more than a quick in and out conversation. I think it deserves a little bit more time. Crystal, did you want to share something?
We were talking about what Black women need from communication, and I was like, okay.
Well, jump in. What share your thoughts?
No, I just wanted to say that the only thing that I would really appreciate is for you to say what you mean, but just be sure your delivery is one that I can receive. I don't want you to tell me something you think I want to hear. Like, if I ask you, do I look fat in these pants? And if I do, tell me in a way that I can hear it.
That's a trap. Don't ever answer that, fellas. Don't ever answer that, fellas, ever.
But but my husband knows. My husband knows. If I ask you, like you said, somebody said earlier, don't ask a question you don't want to answer to. No, when I ask you, I want to know the answer. And don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me the truth. And my communication style is always tell me the truth, but deliver it in a way that I can receive it.
With love.
I love that, Crystal. I love that. We actually talked about that a little bit earlier, and I think it was Lisa that was saying, no, we do want to hear the truth. I think that is a misconception that women don't want to hear the truth. I think what happens is that, to your point, Crystal, maybe the way it's delivered is a challenge, or I'm gonna hear you. It's either the way it's delivered is a challenge, or what's happening is we can sense when it's not the truth. Robert?
Okay, so as the other side to this, tell me the truth. I think also we started off about communication, and I also think that we have to understand that there's also communication styles. And my delivery may be totally different than your style. And I think that's one of the things I know that as a husband, or as Crystal's husband, I've had to try to think through myself is how am I a better husband to her, and how am I a better communicator to her? There's sometimes I fail miserably. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We had a situation probably 3 months ago, and I was horrible at communication, horrible. But it is a process that I have to go through, and understanding the way that I communicated with my boys or my mother or my sisters or whatever it is much different than how I communicate with her, because she didn't grow up with us. We didn't necessarily talk a whole lot about it, but the impacts of our parents, we did talk about it a little bit, but the impacts of how our parents communicated, or how we observed communication from our parents, how they may have given us information or not given us information, how they talk to each other, how they didn't talk to each other, sometimes plays a role, even if we don't even know it. It plays a role in how we interact with our partners, and how we address them, and sometimes engage in dialogue and discussion. And we may be very animated, and they may not be able to receive that message in the animation. They may need someone to say, "This is what I'm saying, and I need you to say it really in formal words," or they might need somebody to say it in different. So I say all that to say, like, it's an evolutionary process, and the reality is too is the longer you're together, you continue to evolve and devolve. And so sometimes what may have worked at 40 doesn't work at 45, but then it works again at 52. So, it's a constant process of ebbing and flowing and changing. So that's all I wanted to say.
My problem was with my communication. I was a great personal trainer. I was a great coach. You know why? Because I knew how to immediately look at your squat and tell you exactly what the problem was and how to fix it and get a better squat out of you in that moment. But that did not translate with me and my wife because she didn't want a solution in that moment.
Right.
She wanted me to hear what she was saying, all her words. She wanted me to acknowledge that what she was saying, was valid, right? And empathize with how she felt about it in that moment. And then, when she's ready, let's talk about a solution, But, I get the data, I process it, here's my solutions. That didn't always, do me well, and part of my process for becoming a better communicator was learning how to be a better listener and a better empathizer when I'm being talked to about issues that someone may have.
But is that not, I wanted to say, is that not, to me, I think that is one of the core pieces of love, is that I understand what type of communication works for you.
Yeah.
And it may not be comfortable for me, but because I love you, I'm going to communicate in a way that, like, for instance, Crystal was saying, I don't mind the truth, but it's how you deliver the truth that is it to me. Well, Rob might not have grown up in a way where he has to be very intentional about how he tells Crystal the truth, but he knows that this is what Crystal needs. So yeah, because I love you, this is not necessarily my natural flow, but because I love you, I'm going to make sure that I make the effort to speak. Everybody always talks about the love language, but that's so important. Like, love is about, let me make the changes that I need to make to show up for you the way that you need me to show up, even if that means that that's not my comfortable way of moving.
Mm-hmm. And that goes both ways. Like, I've got to change. I have to adjust my delivery, but on the other side, I feel like you should be willing to change the way you receive also. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of people, not just women, but also, just people in general, have a hard time taking criticism because they may be really self-critical on themselves. So one more piece of criticism may not be palatable. But, if you trust somebody in your life that they have your best interest at heart, right, then you should trust that they have your best interest at heart when they're delivering that constructive criticism as well. You know what I mean? If it's delivered in love.
You got to know your audience, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. I think part of knowing your audience is also, the more you stay connected to your mate, the more you can see your mate. I think oftentimes we got to be willing to look and pay attention and not see it necessarily through the lens of what we want, but the lens of what our partner needs. And that's, it's two different things. Like how we receive information, receive love, receive support may be very different. And we may have to even be willing to relearn or expand how we show up in support of supporting our mate. So,
and that's just not in male relationships. That comes in relationships. I can talk about me and Renee. You know, I am the phone. I'm getting ready to start running down what's going on. You know, what's happening with me. You know, blah blah. Renee is the. I had to be very intentional. She needs for you to check in first. She needs to make, you know, how are you doing? How are you, you know, and that wasn't comfortable for me. And we used to battle that. You know what I'm saying? Like, listen, I'm giving you, but right now, I'm calling you. We can do all this soft skill stuff in a minute. But because Renee is my friend and I love her, I had to realize that although that's not my natural nature, this is something that my friend needs to be okay. And so I think that is what that happens in relationships. Seriously, I had to slow down to make sure that when I call Renee, I know you are going to have to check into her world before you get off this phone. Whether you want to or not, because your friend, that is important to her. Where I have other friends, they don't need. You understand what I'm saying? But I know that this is what my friend needed to be at. And so that's what I mean. It's an ebb and flow. You know, sometimes you may have to do things, I think, in communication with your mate that may not be natural, that may not necessarily be comfortable for you. But because you love this person and because you know this is what they need to pay, and because I value you, I'm willing to make whatever shift that I need to make in order to make sure that you're good.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Lisa. So I'm back at now how this information is being communicated and how we're delivering it to one another, right? And if in fact it is going to hurt me and you know it's going to hurt me, what's next? Is it okay to open me up like that and just leave me hurt because you had to give me some hard information? Right? What's next? Because the love and the care is your ability again for us to be whole in all of this, right? I may have to tell you something that I don't really want to have to share with you because you're not going to respond to it well. So now I'm back at our inability to really be intimate and vulnerable with one another. But if we're really trying to create this, we're having some hard conversations sometimes, right? But we want to leave one another in a good place as best possible. And sometimes that means holding space. And sometimes that means we need to take a minute and have our own space, right? But don't just dump that information on one another and not think that it's okay to make sure that your partner is okay.
Well, I don't know if you guys are people of faith, but the Bible says, it says, don't let the sun set on your wrath, you know, so, you know, don't leave things open and bare, you know, make sure that your partner feels loved at the end of the conflict, you know?
Yeah, it's a good point.
So great. That was very powerful, Quran. Like, give me the truth, I'm okay. But then what happens? How do we repair, you know, what may very well be broken, you know, and I can receive it, but let's make sure we think, okay, what's the next step? You know what I'm saying? After you
may be challenged in even receiving it. I may, right? So when I was married, my husband did not want to have to deliver information because for him, there was something wrong with me being super sensitive. I appreciated my sensitivity. It served me very well. But you're not comfortable with what that would cost you emotionally as a man. You did not like the idea or thought that it would make me cry. And you don't have to fix me, right? But he didn't want to deliver information. So now I can't get honesty from you. That's problematic that you can't be honest with me, right? Because you're afraid of, you think that I cannot handle the information. My ability to handle the information, that's one thing. It's okay if it does hurt me. It's okay if I express that it hurts me. It's where do we go from there?
I love that.
Just dump one another off there. Where do we go from there?
Well,
that may tie back into, Renee, when you're talking about the healing.
Yeah, definitely. And we're also going to talk again, because I just want us to think about this. So earlier today, Chad and I were talking, and he helped me to word it the right way. And one of the things that I said is, sometimes, do we find that some men show up in ways that are cowardly because of what you're saying, Karan? Maybe people, and it might not just be just men, but we're talking about in relationships, but just in general, people may show up cowardly because they're not comfortable with sharing in conflict and knowing that things are going to hurt. And so they'll take the easy way out.
Yeah, for sure.
And what happens is it doesn't help the relationship. It may delay conflict, or it may delay some type of disagreement or hurt or pain, but it doesn't resolve whatever the challenge is. And so that's one of the things that I think we need to talk about again next time, is conflict, because I'm very mindful. You guys have been on this call for almost 2 hours, and I want to be respectful of our Sunday evening. The one thing I do want you guys to do is, in 30 seconds or less, give words of wisdom around communication between Black men and women. A thought, encouragement, 30 seconds or less. And then I want to tell you guys a little bit about this Tanzania trip, and we're going to close out. So, Karan?
So remain open, right? Just remain open. Don't close yourself off to communication or put judgments around, your ability or inability to communicate. Just remain open, and it will happen, right? It's putting in the work and just remaining open to it working.
Love it.
Making it work.
I love it. Okay, Lisa?
I just, we can get to a place where people can just be their genuine and authentic self, meaning the good, bad, and the ugly. And and it's okay. It's okay that we get to a place where we can just really show up and communicate totally as who we are. I mean, things have to have balance. It's very important. But at the end of the day, there is an authenticity that just is unmatched when we are with each other.
I love it.
Communicate.
I love it. Thank you. 30 seconds or less, Francis.
My wisdom would be to step away from the idea that respect is something that's earned and not freely given. It's the limitless resources, as well as compassion, also a limitless resource. I think approaching every mode of communication, whether it be online and with those core virtues, will enable you or everyone to hold space for everybody's authentic Blackness, right? And not do something that makes you tangential to your Blackness, that doesn't deceive the Black culture or puts you outside of the box that we thought of what was our identity.
Got it. Thank you. I love it. Okay. Chad, 30 seconds or less.
Your partner, your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever it is, should be one of your favorite courses of study. Keep learning about that person and keep staying in wonder and amazement of every piece of information that you gather.
Love it. Rob, 30 seconds or less.
My quote is, or my word of wisdom is, listen to and with love, and not to make your point.
I love it. Okay. All right. So I want to close out. I know that we have Hakeem, we have the Teaching Art Institute on with us. They were like our silent listeners. They are partnering with me. We are doing our First Love Camp in Tanzania, as I said earlier, and I just encourage you guys to really consider joining us. It's going to be a fabulous time for us to really do some work around this topic and really learn from some greats, whether it's a married couple, whether it's me around vulnerability, whether we do yoga, whether we do a myriad of artistic activities around strengthening yourself. I encourage you to attend with us. And if you're interested in more information, definitely contact Teaching Artist Institute on Facebook. Thank you guys for attending. We'll see you the third Sunday of every month. We'll have the next one here at 7 p.m. And you guys have a wonderful Sunday and a productive start to your week. And it just started spring, so do something new in support of
Good
spring.
stuff, good stuff, good stuff, good stuff, guys. Good stuff, guys.
Have a great
As
evening,
usual.
everyone. Bye.
Have a good night.
Great
Have a good
seeing
night.
everyone. Have a phenomenal week.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes.
Bye-bye.
Great conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
All right, all right. Hopefully you all enjoyed that conversation. It's 10:15, so hopefully you enjoyed my sister Renee, Lisa, brother Chad. Oh man, those the others. Oh gosh, I didn't write down all the names, but hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. But definitely reach out, leave a message for myself. Text 410-209-9687 if you or someone you know may be interested in the Love Camp Tanzania, or if she may be looking for other hosts or guests as well to be a part of this panel. So hopefully, if you enjoyed the panel, that's Renee Miller. Uh, so definitely text me. I'll get you in touch with her. She did a great job. Thank you all for tuning in. Holla at the Success Gala Haki Ami Tanzania 2022. We out. Peace.